The Olympic Games is the foremost sporting event for athletes across the globe. Participation in the Olympics is an honor and a privilege that not many people are able to be part of. The Olympic athlete experience includes representing one's home country, winning medals, setting world records, traveling the world, and making lifelong friendships. No one goes to the Olympics thinking that their lives will be at risk. Sadly, this was not the case for 11 members of the Israeli athletic delegation. The Munich Summer Olympics in 1972 was supposed to be an exciting and reputation-changing event in Germany 27 years after World War II. Instead, it became known for the Munich Massacre, a terrorist hostage situation which captured the world's attention on live television and revealed the serious lapse in security, which failed to protect and defend the thousands of Olympic athletes and coaches in attendance. A conflict between Israel and Palestine had been going on for ages. It started back 100 years ago when the League of Nations, in 1917, recognized Palestine as its own state apart from Israel for the Jewish people. Over the years, hatred between the Palestinians and the Israelis continued, as tensions regarding the rightful ownership of the homeland grew. The Sinai Campaign of 1956 and the 6 Days War of 1967 were just two of the many conflicts between the two groups, who fought against each other constantly for Jerusalem, the West Bank, and the Sinai Peninsula. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict had become a way of life for these two warring groups, and their struggles continued into the next decade. Israel and Palestine weren't the only countries struggling. Germany was undergoing an identity crisis of its own. The Winter Olympics of 1972 marked the first time that Germany had hosted a global sporting event since World War II. The last major event held in Germany was the 1938 Summer Olympic Games, when African-American track and field athlete Jesse Owens won a gold medal against the pure Aryans of Germany driven by Hitler. With these Olympics, Germany was trying to show that, despite its reputation from World War II, it was once again a peaceful, welcoming nation. The 1972 Games were even being called the Happy Olympics. Germans wanted everything about the Munich Games to seem as positive and non-threatening as possible, so organizers even decided to go without having armed guards. A shortcoming of Munich's Olympic planning that ultimately led to the kidnapping and killing of these Israeli Olympians was actually the lack of security. The Olympic village that the athletes were staying in was not very secure. In fact, the players of all countries always used to jump the fence to sneak back into the athletic complex after their non-sanctioned nightly activities, and security guards never took notice. Days before the games began, a news article in the Irish Times reported on the discovery of a plan for killings at the Olympics, but officials did nothing about it. If authorities would have listened to these threats, the Munich Massacre could have, from the beginning, been avoided. The group who had been planning and ultimately carried out the hostage situation was Black September. The name is from a bloody and Black September in 1970 when the Palestinians were massacred by the Jordanian army loyal to the King Hussein. In the early morning hours of September 5, 1972, members of Black September were able to infiltrate the Olympic Village with ease. The terrorists went straight to the Israeli apartments on Connolly Strasse 13 and began to knock down the doors of the rooms. One of the coaches, Yosef Romano, saw this happening and began to try and hold them off, while 7 of his athletes escaped. Sadly, Romano was shot by the terrorists, along with Andre Spitzer, a fencing coach for the Israeli Olympians. Although this led to 7 Olympians escaping, 9 were not so lucky and were captured. They were held hostage by the Palestinian terrorists in their own apartment for 18 hours. At this point, the world took notice. TV stations who were nearby covering the Olympic events began to gather and record for live audiences around the world. This marked the first time that a terrorist activity was broadcast worldwide for international viewers to watch within the comfort and safety of their own homes. American sportscaster Jim McKay, known for his popular Wide World of Sports show, was on air for 14 straight hours for the entire hostage situation. German police began to communicate with the terrorists and soon found out that Black September's main objective for the hostage situation was to force the release of 274 Palestinian prisoners held by Israel. The police were not trying to get in touch with Israel to release these prisoners because they did not want to negotiate. Instead, their intent was to eliminate the terrorists and remove the threat altogether rather than giving in to the demands of Black September. Despite all attempts by the German negotiators to settle the situation peacefully within the Olympic Village, negotiations finally broke down, and the terrorists demanded that they be provided an escape. They requested to be transported to the Fürstenfeldbruck airport, where awaiting planes would take them to an undetermined Arab country. German police provided a bus for the terrorists, who forced their blindfolded hostages to accompany them. Little did the terrorists know, while they were being transported on the buses to closely located helicopters for the trip to the airport, the German police were setting up snipers at the destination. 5 snipers were put in place at the airport for each terrorist, but German police miscounted and there were actually 8 total terrorists. The snipers had no experience in being a sniper, were barely trained in shooting rifles, and had no communication with each other due to technology at the time, all of which severely decreased the odds of the mission being successful. When the terrorists got to the airport, they checked the airplane and saw the cockpit was empty. The police had provided the terrorists with the plane as promised, just not a pilot to see them through to safety after leaving the airport. As terrorists were caught on the runway with no feasible exit plan, the German snipers took aim and a dogfight ensued. The terrorists, knowing they had no way out, wanted to ensure that their Israeli hostages would have the same outcome. The Palestinian terrorists threw grenades, blowing up both helicopters. Horrifically, those helicopters still held the blindfolded hostages, and all of them were killed. German snipers successfully killed some of the terrorists, while others were able to escape. In the meantime, news outlets heard that the hostages were saved and that all was well. After debacle at the airport, news stations were finally relayed the message that the hostages had actually died. As a result, reporters had to go back on their previous words and explain to the international community that all 7 Olympians and 4 coaches had needlessly died as pawns in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The compromise between the German police and Black September was not reached, leading to more deaths instead of imprisoned Palestinians being released and Israeli hostages being saved. Almost all of the terrorists were killed in the shootout at the airport, and the remaining were hunted down months later. After only a 24-hour delay in the Games, the Olympics went on like nothing had happened, minus the Israeli delegation, whose Olympic dreams were cut short, as 11 of them had been murdered, and the rest returned to their homeland in mourning without competing. Just 20 days after the shocking events in Munich, U.S. President Richard Nixon gave a speech about counterterrorism to the American citizens on September 27, 1972. He talked about how dangerous the world was and how country leaders needed to try to work together to reach world peace. He told everyone that terrorism was a very urgent concern and needed to be addressed. Even with this speech, there was still a continuation of terrorism. Just 1 month later, on October 29th, Black September terrorists had attacked and hijacked the Lufthansa Flight 615 plane, which was going from Syria to Frankfurt, Germany. The terrorist group was once again trying to get their Palestinian people released from the prisons in Israel, threatening to blow up the 727 jet if their demands weren't met. But police got to the group and the plan failed as they were caught and arrested. These attacks showed the international sporting community how terrible the Olympic security was at this time. As a result, the International Olympic Committee, known as the IOC, began to try and resolve their security lapses and become more proactive and prepared for the upcoming Olympics. Now, every single Olympic game has expanded in size of security because the IOC does not want something like Munich to happen ever again. So they hope, with tighter and more complex security, all visiting athletes and coaches will be safe. Even though many years have passed since the 1972 Olympics, the memory of the murdered Israeli athletes and coaches has loomed as a dark reminder over later Olympic Games. However, in the 2012 London Olympics, the IOC denied the request to have a moment of silence for the 40th anniversary for the Munich Massacre. This refusal to acknowledge the memory of these slain Olympians and their coaches actually served as a reminder of the Olympic Committee's failure to provide adequate safety for its athletes. Additionally, the increased attention to security has not always been successful. During the 1996 Summer Olympics in Atlanta, Georgia, the Centennial Olympic Park was bombed by Eric Robert Rudolph and the Army of God terrorist group. Only 1 person died, but 111 others were injured. In recent years, the IOC and hosting countries have collaborated to develop more security measures for the Olympics, such as cyber defense, X-ray machines, more efficient metal detectors, cutting-edge ground vehicles and aircraft, and more troops hired to police and guard the Olympics. The tragic losses in the Munich Massacre stand as a reminder of the important responsibility of the IOC and the host countries to provide extraordinary levels of security for its athletes, coaches, and fans. Never again should the hopes and dreams of an Olympian be taken away by the hatred and evil intentions of a terrorist organization.